Namaskar. Today is January 31st, 2025, and the news from Canada is that there is a threat of looming trade war over tariffs between Canada and USA. President Donald Trump has announced plans to impose a 25% tariff on Canada and Mexico from February 1st, that is tomorrow, and on China also 10% tariff from February 1st. He cites concerns over illegal immigration, fentanyl trafficking, and trade imbalances as primary reasons for this action. Not only he is targeting or threatening Canada and Mexico and China, but he is also threatening the European Union with tariffs over pharmaceuticals. He has also threatened BRICS nations, which consist of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, and some other countries, with 100% tariff if they try to de dollarize or move away from US dollar. So the tariff, he says, will come into effect from February 18th for oil and gas, and the tariff rate would be 10%. So the key point emerging from Trump's threat are that he is imposing tariffs because there is illegal immigration and drug trafficking from Canada. And he also cites trade deficits as another reason for tariffs. Trump asserts that the US does not need the products from Canada and Mexico, indicating a push towards greater economic self reliance. He says he will exempt oil and gas from higher tariff rates and has decided to impose a 10% tariff from February 18th. Both Canada and Mexico have signaled potential retaliatory measures which could affect sectors like agriculture and automotive industries. So now let's see what will be the impact of these tariffs on goods trade and services trade. Canada and the US share one of the world's largest trading partners relationship, with nearly $3.6 billion worth of goods and services crossing the border each day in 2023. So if we look at Canada's exports to the US, it totaled 595.5 billion Canadian dollars, accounting for 77.6% of Canada's merchandise exports. And if we look at Canada's imports to the US, it amounted to 374 billion Canadian dollars, representing 49.6% or nearly 50% of Canada's merchandise imports. And top Canadian exports to the US in 2023 were crude petroleum, which was nearly 23% of total exports, motor vehicles, which accounted for 8.07%, refined petroleum, accounting for 2.92%, petroleum gas, which accounted for 2.8%, and motor vehicle parts, 2.76%. And if we look at the trade in services, the Canada's service export to the US were valued at 307 billion Canadian dollars, making up 53.3% of Canada's total services exports. And if we look at Canada's service imports from the US, it totaled 123.8 billion Canadian dollars, which accounted for 58.6% of Canada's total services imports. So you can see that US is the biggest trading partner of Canada. Overall, the Canada-US trade relationship is vital for both nations. With the US being Canada's largest trading partner, and Canada ranking as a top trading partner for 35 US states out of 50. So now let's see what will be the impact of 25% tariff on Canada. A 25% tariff imposed by the US on Canadian imports would have significant economic consequences for both countries. And let's look at the breakdown of the potential impacts. The US is Canada's largest trading partner, accounting for nearly 78% of Canadian exports. A 25% tariff would make Canadian goods more expensive in the US, thus reducing demand. And the industries which will be mostly affected by the tariffs would be automobile and parts, oil and gas, steel and aluminium, agriculture and dairy. And the impact on Canadian economy would be far greater than we can expect it. It could lead to lower GDP growth, job losses, currency depreciation, supply chain disruptions. And if we look at the US economy and its impact on US consumers and businesses, it will be higher prices for US consumers. Goods imported from Canada would become more expensive. For example, cars, oils, and food. And as a consequence, Canada might impose counter tariffs on US goods as it did in 2018, affecting US exports like steel, aluminium, and agricultural products. Disruptions for US industries. Many US businesses rely on Canadian parts and raw materials. For example, automakers in Michigan, tariffs would increase their cost. So, if we look at possible responses from Canada, we can see trade diversification. Canada might seek to expand trade with Europe, Asia, and Latin America. The Canadian government could also offer subsidies or tax reliefs for affected industries. Canada could challenge the tariffs through the USMCA or NAFTA 2.0 dispute resolution system or the WTO. So, to conclude, a 25% tariff by the US would be damaging for both economies. Canada would suffer job losses, slower growth, and industrial setbacks. The US would face higher costs, supply chain issues, and retaliation. Both countries would experience weaker economic ties and potential trade wars. Now let's see what will be the 20%, what will be the impact of 25% tariff on Canadian jobs, and look at the specific data in particular. Imposing a 25% tariff on Canadian export to the US would have significant repercussions for Canada's economy and labour market. The gross domestic product, according to the Canadian Chamber of Commerce and Business, it projects that tariffs could reduce Canada's GDP by approximately 2.6%, equating to a loss of around Canadian dollars 78 billion dollars. And analysts from Oxford Economics also warn that implementation of 25% tariff could push Canada into a recession by mid 2025. And if we look at the employment impact, the same analysis from Oxford Economics estimates that the tariffs could lead to approximately 150,000 layoffs, increasing Canada's unemployment rate to 7.9% by the end of 2025. And looking at sector specific impacts, automotive industry, given the integrated nature of the North American automotive sector, with over $110 billion in bilateral trade in 2023, tariffs could disrupt supply chains, leading to production slowdowns and potential job losses. In the energy sector, Canada supplies the US with 20% of its consumed oil. Tariffs could reduce demand, impacting revenues and employment in Canada's energy sector. And inflation rate. The imposition of tariffs is projected to increase Canada's inflation rate to 7.2% by mid 2025, driven by higher cost of importing goods and potential retaliatory measures. So, to conclude, a 25% US tariff on Canadian imports would likely lead to a contraction in Canada's GDP, significant job losses, and heightened inflation, pushing the country into a recession. The severity of these impacts underscores the importance of diplomatic and economic strategies to mitigate potential damages. And my understanding is that Trump will be more comfortable dealing with the conservatives in Canada because ideologically they are the same. Republicans and conservatives are ideologically very similar to each other. And moreover, there are credibility issues also with lame duck Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and his government in Canada. So, in order to better handle the tariff crisis, uh, maybe we can have elections and have a new government. Thank you very much.